What's up, collectors and investors? So I just watched a fantastic video by Jeff Wilson where he interviewed Darren Rovell. If you don't know, Darren Rovell is the one that has wrote several articles on Cardporn, aka Wine Garcia. But this was a great interview. It's about 43 minutes long. He really goes into specifics on how this guy operates behind the scenes. One thing that I found interesting is Darren actually believes that Cardporn enjoys scamming people. Like, he enjoys like the adrenaline rush. It's not just about the money. And apparently the guy is so evil that he will even leave like an Easter egg behind to let you know that he got you and there's nothing you can do about it. One thing I found really interesting was the specifics on those photos that he used to authenticate his Michael Jordan jersey. What he had done was he took pictures of the jersey that he owns and he superimposed those pictures onto actual game footage photos. So imagine that level of fine detail that looked so correct that it fooled one of the top memorabilia authenticators in the industry. So it's one thing to know your way around a Photoshop program, but superimposing your photo onto another photo and making it look perfect, it's a whole nother level of photo doctoring. So now knowing the level of doctoring that he did to these photos, it really took me back to the Spiegel's case and their LeBron James Exquisite Rookie Patch Auto, and how a very suspicious looking photo ultimately led to taking down the Spiegel's auction off Golden Auction on its first night. And remember, this is when the hobby was at its absolute hottest. This card was estimated to fetch at least 2.5 million. That's an estimate. We really don't know how high it would have went because we just had a BGS 9 gold to 23 sell for a record-breaking $5.4 million. So this would have been the very next sell after that gold for $5.4 million that would have been sold. And it was to 99. It was the base version. It was also a BGS 9, very nice patch, very nice auto. So we don't know exactly how much that would have fetched because the market was still kind of going up at that time. This is really unfortunate for the Spiegel brothers. I mean, $2.5 million, that's life-changing money right there. And I know the time period that they bought this card because they bought this card around the same time period that I bought my last LeBron James RPA. It was low five figures back then. They had held on to this card as an investment for a very long time and they thought this was the perfect time to sell it. Obviously, because the market is absolutely on fire at this time. But this is very unfortunate for those guys. I met the Spiegel brothers and they're very nice people. Very charitable. And I'm not just saying that. When I went and visited the Spiegels back earlier this year and got the interview, I personally witnessed Steven give to a family that had been struggling. And the crazy thing is, he took no credit for it. The family had no idea where the help had came from. And apparently he does this often. He finds out people that are struggling in his community and he goes and he helps them and takes no credit for it. This is the kind of people that the Spiegels are. And there's no doubt in my mind that some of the money that they would have won in that auction would have went to charity, 100%. But Cardporn would have you believing otherwise. Cardporn directly messaged me several times and had me believing that they were bad people, stating that, oh, they bought this LeBron James RPA and then they found out that it was altered. So then they did everything that they could to prove that it was real, to the extent of going to Upper Deck and lying to Upper Deck and creating this whole story and convincing them to write him a letter and then taking that letter to Beckett and getting Beckett to put a special label on the holder. So the card would ultimately be a 1 of 1, as it would have been the only authenticated patch by Upper Deck. And he kept telling me that they had been crooks for a very long time, which I found very interesting because you didn't even know the Spiegels and the Spiegels didn't know who you were. It's almost like he was talking about himself. In those DMs, he talked a lot about the art world and how, like, in the art world, this happens all the time where guys will try to reverse engineer something to make it seem like it's authentic. And he was saying that the Spiegels were reverse engineering the LeBron RPA, but everything he said was totally false. First off, the letter. So according to Cardporn, the Spiegels created this story, the story about the card being replaced. The original card was damaged out of the box, and the original owner sent that card in to Upper Deck and got it replaced. Cardporn says that the story is completely fabricated by the Spiegels in order to get this letter to make their card be authentic. But the real story is that the Spiegels put this card up for auction on eBay, and then they started hearing grumblings about the card possibly having a swapped out patch. So they took it down and they contacted Upper Deck. And honestly, they didn't know what to expect. They thought maybe they could take the card to Upper Deck and they could look at it and maybe tell if it was altered or not, or maybe by some small miracle that Upper Deck actually had some kind of archived digital library of of these cards. I mean, he was just basically hoping for anything. But the real story to this is actually kind of incredible. So he contacts Upper Deck, sends pictures, everything. And the guy he gets in contact with was the guy that was in charge of customer care. And he'd been there for 24 years. And with this being such a high profile card, he actually remembers replacing this card. But when the Spiegels asked him about this card, he said, I know it's authentic. And they're like, how do you know it's authentic? He said, because I replaced this card. And they said, what do you mean you replaced it? There was a damaged card. The owner sent it in and we replaced it with this card. So this is all new information to the Spiegels. This all came from the employee of Upper Deck that had been there for 24 years. And this employee from Upper Deck said, why don't you just come down to the Upper Deck headquarters and bring your family? We'll give you a nice little tour and we'll talk about this. So he goes to Upper Deck, he takes his kids, everything. They have a nice little tour. And at the end of the tour, the guy hands Steven a letter. And Steven was kind of like, what is this? He opens the letter and it's a nice letter saying that Upper Deck replaced this card. So he didn't even know that he was going to get this letter. But Cardporn would have you believe that he just stormed up to the Upper Deck headquarters with this made up story and bullied an Upper Deck employee into writing a letter. I don't know in what world that makes any sense. So the Spiegels also had been in contact with Beckett when their card was questioned. So that's when they went to Beckett and they took the letter. And Beckett was kind of taken back. They were like, you got a letter saying that this is authenticated from Upper Deck? So then not only were they standing by their certification, they said, let me see that card. So they take the card and they put a fresh new label on it. But this time the label said it's authenticated by Upper Deck. It makes that card a very special item, basically a one of one. This was all long before he even knew who Cardporn was. Cardporn knew who he was. Okay, fast forward in time, he sends it to Golden Auctions, and that's where everything got a little crazy. So as soon as they showed a preview of this card, Cardporn was all over it. As stated by Ken Golden himself in this post right here, where he thanked Cardporn for being all over this, working hard behind the scenes since the preview of this auction. This guy, Juan Garcia, he was working around the clock trying to discredit this card. And he knew he had two hurdles that he had to jump. One being the letter from Upper Deck, and two being the certification from Beckett. So in order to do that, he started floating around this photo of the card, supposedly from 2005, that shows the card with the white patch. Claims that he's had this in his hard drive since 2005. And the way he's trying to prove this is by the metadata. Because if you notice here, he's got everything crossed out, but the metadata that says 2005. If you look at this photo, it looks very, very suspect. First off, this screenshot has a bunch of Korean letters on it. And I know that because I lived there for a year and a half, so I understand the language. Him being from Australia, why does he have a program that's in Korean? The thing about this is it proves nothing. Because you can capture this whole screenshot right here, then you can just alter that. Because I found this very similar screenshot right here on Blowout Forums, also in Korean letters. He could have easily just taken something like this and altered just the part that has the card on it. But the thing about this is Photoshop is a very terrible job. If you look at it closely, you look at the bottom, it's pretty much a dead giveaway. And I actually found a card that I think that he used to put the white patch on the 44.99. This is the 1 of 99. If you look at the patch closely, it has the same shadows. So all he would have had to do was just cut and paste that patch out and put it on the 44 of 99. Darken the shadows in more so that you can't tell where it was actually cut and pasted. He also darkened the patch on the card quite a bit. But look at the 1 and the 44. These two look very similar, and I think it's a match. Now, I'm not saying 100% that Cardporn did this himself. He could have had help. Somebody else could have done this. But he did use this photo, and I think that he knew that it was photoshopped. But I won't go into how I proved that this patch was real. If you want to check out my older video right here, I go into great specifics on how that I proved that this patch was actually authentic. So if you're curious about that, I recommend that you watch this. But anyway, he starts floating around this photo and he uses that to pressure Upper Deck. So he made multiple phone calls to Upper Deck, just harassing them, pressuring them, showing the photos that he has. And I think he just attacked this poor guy at Upper Deck so much that the guy just didn't want the heat. And I don't know exactly what was said, but when King Golden contacted him later, after Cardporn had been pressuring him all this time, King Golden claims that they were being wishy-washy on the phone, and that's what he told me on a private message. So that, along with the photo, that was enough for King Golden to say, go ahead and just withdraw this card from the auction. So after that happened, Spiegels called Upper Deck and was like, what's going on? And that same employee at Upper Deck was like, he's like, look, Cardporn's been calling, been pressuring me, attacking me. He said, I don't know what you did, but it seems like these Cardporn guys are out to get you. He said, I know the card's real. I remember replacing it, but these Cardporn guys are just calling me, harassing me, attacking me, and it's a lot of heat. So ultimately, I think this led to a lot of confusion. But once Upper Deck became aware of the work that I did to prove that the card was real, they 100% stand by that letter. Cardporn wants to claim that they retracted the letter, but the letter was never retracted. And now they 100% stand by that letter. Oh, but Cardporn didn't stop there. They called Beckett and they harassed Beckett as well, trying to get them to decertify that card. But Beckett also became aware of my findings, and they pretty much told Cardporn to go pound sand that we're not decertifying this. But the damage was already done because the card was already pulled down. And the Spiegels were out at least $2.5 million. So again, I asked the question, what was the motivation? I mean, it seems to me that he worked harder discrediting this card than all of these scams that we're finding about now. And for him to put that much effort into this, it had to come down to either money, a personal grudge against the Spiegels, which I find hard because they didn't know each other, or maybe he was just trying to earn personal favors with someone important. Of course, this is all just speculation, but I'm curious to know what you think. So by now, everyone knows that the Spiegels have a lawsuit against Cardporn. It was very hard to track this guy down to even serve him, because as you know, he has multiple names, probably has multiple hiding spots in Australia. And the way it's looking, the lawsuit might not even go to court. It could likely just get thrown out, which is very sad, because even if this goes to court and the Spiegels actually do win a lawsuit, the unfortunate thing is that they'll probably just break even, because you got to think they got to pay a legal team that have been working on this case for a year. And I can't imagine that that's cheap. Not to mention, we don't know how high that card would have went in that auction. It could have been $3 million plus, and they'll never see that money. I think the only saving grace right now is that I think most of the community now believes that the card is actually authentic. And Upper Deck stands by that letter, which makes it like a one of one. And Beckett is also behind it, and they have the special label on it. So the card does have value. But even as a one of one in today's market, it will never be worth as much as it would have been back then. And I feel like, yeah, they will probably just break even. So I think the most important thing that they really want now is to bring this guy to justice, have Juan Garcia admit what he did, why he did it, and who else was involved. And I think once that's all out in the open, that would be considered a win for the Spiegels. And if this never goes to court, the Spiegels are just out a lot of money. And that's very unfortunate. And it's all because of this Cardporn guy. So again, what is his motivations? It's not because he cares about the hobby, especially now, everything that we know, all these criminal acts against investors and collectors. It's pretty clear the only thing that he cares about is himself. Okay, I'm gonna put on my conspiracy theory hat for a minute. These are a couple of scenarios that I thought about, that I speculated on, that maybe was the reasoning or the motivation for doing this, for taking down this auction. I think he wanted to discredit the card and get it taken down as fast as possible before it sold. And like I said before, I think it's very interesting that as soon as it got taken down, there was a private buyer, and this private buyer offered $1 million for the card. And the buyer obviously knew all the baggage that came with that card and didn't care. So let's say Cardporn knew that buyer. We don't know who the buyer is. Golden Auctions should know who the buyer is, because in order to buy anything from Golden Auctions, you have to register and get approved by them to be able to even enter their auctions. So it would be very interesting to know who this buyer was. Talk to this buyer and ask him if he had a relationship with Cardporn. Because one of my conspiracy theories is somehow or another this card was going to end up in the hands of Cardporn. And he would have got it for $1 million. And I can only imagine that he was naive to think that the market was going to keep rising. So even if he discredited the card, he obviously knew that it was real. So he could either just keep it in his personal collection, because we all know that he's a collector now. But I don't think that's what he would have done. I think he was trying to get a quick flip. I think he would have cracked it out of the Beckett holder and probably sent it to PSA to get an authentic altered label. And being how nice the eye appeal is on that card, he probably thought he could flip the card. Like I said, the market was hotter than it had ever been. There was no other comp other than the gold that sold for $5.4 million. No one would have known that he owned the card. He could send it to any auction house with that PSA authentic altered label. And let's say he got the card for $1 million, but he sells it for $1,300,000. I mean, if it's like $300,000, that's more than most people make in 5 years. But I think that makes more sense than him just holding this card for years and years just because he wants it. I think it was all about money. The only other thing I can think of is he's trying to get it in the hands of a friend or an associate. But that really wouldn't make a lot of sense because the card was discredited. So the guy would have to deal with it being known as authentic altered. So that doesn't really make as much sense to me as him trying to somehow make money off the card. I don't know, but that's me with my crazy conspiracy theory hat on. Tell me what you think. Anyways, if you like this video, please give it a like. And you guys have a great rest of your day.